Girl, have you ever looked at a digital camera and thought, that's a magic little device that turns light into numbers? Yeah, it might have been high when I had that thought, but I was listening to the Generative Arts podcast recently, an old episode because they don't exist anymore, and they were talking about how you would use a camera as an instrument. And I thought, I could build that. That seems easy. So we're going to build that today in TouchDesigner, okay? TouchDesigner, if you're not familiar, is a creative coding environment that is very easy to just sit and explore and do things in. As you can see on the screen, we have TouchDesigner. It is an empty canvas for you to play and explore and make your creative dreams a reality. What we're going to do is we're going to take a webcam and we're going to do a bunch of processing and output to OSC. OSC is open source control, which is just an easy way of sending those signals somewhere else. It could be into Ableton. It could be into Resolume. It could be into MadMapper. Whatever your heart desires, you can take this camera and use it as input into a control system. Let's get started. We've got our empty canvas, and the first thing we're going to do is we need a video device. So it's going to be me in this webcam as our video device. So let's go ahead and get into this and hit tab and just type in video device in. That gives us access to our webcam, and you can see here I am in the webcam. What we want to do is resize this down to minimize the domain, the number of pixels and the number of numbers that we are dealing with. And in order to do that, we're going to use a resolution. So we've got a resolution, and what that does is it just allows us to resize the image that's coming in. Our image here, if we look at some info, is 1280 by 720. That is a lot of numbers that we don't need to deal with. What we do want is a configurable number of numbers to deal with. And so we're going to create a constant variable that we use in order to control how we resize this image. How we're going to do that is we're going to do that with a chop. A chop stands for channel operator. You can think of it as working on an audio signal that is sweet and juicy and easy to work with. In this case, we're going to use a constant one because we just want a single number that does not change over time, okay? So we go over here and we type in constant, and that's a constant. Now, I like to name things appropriately, and we're just going to call this grid, which is going to tell us how many points that we have in our grid. Now, there's two different ways that we could do this. We could either say we want 16 channels, or 16 numbers, or we can say we want it to be a 4x4 grid. I think because it is easier, I'm going to do the 4x4 grid. So in this constant, we're just going to type 4. And that is now a constant variable that does not change. Now, we can change it manually, but it does not change automatically. And what resolution is doing is it just allows you to set what the resolution is for going out. So it'll resize the image from 1280 to 16 by 6 or 4x4. So let's do that. That's going to be over here in the common thing, and we're going to pick custom resolution. Now, it defaults to 256 by 256, but we don't want to use that. What we want to do is use this grid value. So I've clicked on this little star to make it like interactive so that we can like control it or touch it or do whatever with it. In this case, with a constant, we can just drag this right over here, and it's going to ask us what do we want to do. We don't want the current value, we want a chop reference, which basically means anytime that you are looking for this number, what you're going to do is go and reference this other thing over here. And we're going to do that exact same thing so that we get a square. If we turn this on, and you know it's a big blurry mess, it's like having beer goggles at the end of the night whenever you're trying to hook up, okay? So what we want to do here is rather than interpolate the pixels when we resize back to being able to display it, we want to actually say nearest pixel. Now you notice that input smoothness, nearest pixel didn't actually do anything to the output because it's also the viewer smoothness. How do we smooth out the view for this specific view? So we'll also pick nearest pixel. And now you can see we've got colors, we've got blocks, they're flying around, they're dancing, they're doing whatever is happening on the camera because now we have 16 individual squares. We're actually have 64 different numbers. 3 of them change, 1 of them doesn't. And we want to be able to now turn the brightness into a single value so that we have 16 rather than 64 because I am not a size queen and we do not need all those values. The way that we do this, or the way that I do this, is we use a lookup. I don't know of any other way to calculate brightness, but if you do, please drop a comment below because I do not like a two-step process. That's why I'm a top. Let's go ahead and create a lookup, here we have an error. And the reason that we have an error is because the lookup needs two pieces of data. We need the incoming signal that we're going to look up the values for, but we need the table in order to look those values up. We can do this a whole bunch of different ways, but the easiest way is a ramp. That is basically just a gradient. So let's type in ramp. And our default ramp is perfect because it goes from black all the way to white, 0 to 1, and it is exactly what we need because we're going to map that to the brightness of each individual pixel. So we pull that in, and now if we turn this one off and turn this one on, you notice it's a big blurry mess again, and that's just because we need to come here and do nearest pixel and nearest pixel, or use input. And so now we're back to our blocks. But you notice that it is actually not black and white, and that is because we are still using the full RGB lookup. So it's looking up each individual value back. So this is basically a no-op, but what we can do is come here and select luminance, and now, lo and behold, it is black and white, it is monochrome, it is serving real black and white loveliness. And just to make it easier for ourselves, we're going to throw a null in here. A null just basically says this is a thing that we can reference that isn't going to change anything, and that just makes us easier be able to stick stuff in if we decide we want to smooth something out or do something different between the conversion to monochrome and when we're going to convert this into a chop. Because the next thing that we need to do is convert this from an image into a set of signals. And the way that you do that is there is a chop, and we're going to remember chop stands for channel operator, that is called top to, and it's top to chop. And top, which is a texture operator, just means an image. Texture is just a way of GPUs talking about images. Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to come over to chop. We're going to type in top. It's erroring out because it needs to reference a top. So we just drag this null onto there. And lo and behold, we have a bunch of numbers. And if you notice, it is a big, shaky mess. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It has no rhythm. It has no groove. Now, it is a stereotype that all gay people can dance and have rhythm, but that is certainly not true. My toxic ex can absolutely vouch for that because he has no rhythm, no ability to dance, and oh my god, the way that he moved his body was just tragic. What this is doing is it is taking every single one of those pixels and turning it into one of these samples inside of this signal. So it's going to jump around rather than being one channel for each pixel. There's a couple of different ways that we can do this. One of the things that we do want to do is say that it's the full image so that we have all 16 values. And you notice like, it's a little hard to see. R1, R2, R3, blah, blah, blah. So that's basically just each row, each column doing its thing. But what we really want to do is have these values change as the signal is changing over time. And the way that we do that is with a shuffle, because we're basically taking those samples and then shuffling them around into different channels. So let's go ahead and do that. It is called shuffle. So what we're actually going to do is select split in samples, which basically just allows us to split it into different channels. It might not look like if we turn this on, now you see that we have an time sliced signal. So each one represents one of the pixels. Now, you notice there are 64 numbers. And the reason for that is because we converted the RGB image into black and white using luminance, but we didn't actually change the type of number that represents. So if we come back to lookup and we go to common, we are going to come into the lookup, go to common, and we want to change the pixel format to, let's go ahead and say a 32-bit mono. And that forces us into black and white. We've got that. And then the other thing that we want to do is, it is still, even though our image is black and white and we're only sending the things, it is still interpolating RGBA. And so what we want to do is just, we don't care about that, we don't care about that, and we don't care about that. So let's just do those. And so that gives us our full 16 channels. And they are labeled kind of stupidly, to be honest, if we zoom in here. It's R00, R01, R02, R03, and that's for the first the first 4 pixels on the first row, and then it goes down to 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. So it is actually mapping directly to the grid that is on the screen. And that is a good thing, even if it seems a little dumb. So now we have our signal. It's a little bit jumpy though. Okay, what we want to do is we want to calm that down. We want to give it some Xanax. We want to say, baby, do not be so twitchy. The way that we do that is with a filter. It is called Gaussian, and it just basically smooths things out. So let's go ahead and add a filter. And if we come here, we say Gaussian, we do the full width. So you notice that there's lag now. It moves around, it bounces around a little bit, which is one of the problems with smoothing things out with Gaussian. But I found that if you do it like 0.3, it smooths it out, it makes it slightly less jumpy, and it just generally feels a little bit better. So we're just going to leave it there. Now, one of the things about music and about controls is there's the idea of a continuous thing. So this value goes from 0 to 1 with no breaks, no movement between them, and so it will smoothly go. Think of it like a slide whistle. When was the last time that you actually heard a slide whistle that sounds good? It goes, no, we don't want that shit. So what we want to do is actually turn it into a discrete thing that moves in increments, because that is the way that real musical instruments work. A piano, you tinkle on the keys, and it moves in certain specific increments. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do is much better than right? Okay, so what we're going to do there is we're going to use a chop called limit. You might think, limit, doesn't that just make it control the range to a specific set of range? Yes, that is how it's normally used, but it has a wonderful little feature that I'm about to show you. So we type in limit. Okay, so here we are, limit. We're actually not going to turn any of the limit on. We're not going to clamp, we're not going to zoom, we're not going to zigzag. What we're going to do is go over to this quantize. Quantize is just a fancy way of saying just make it turn it into discrete, and we're going to say floor. So it's just going to round things down to whatever our number is and do it in certain increments. I personally love 0.01 because our ranges go from 0 to 1, and so we want 10 separate increments. And if we just, let's go ahead and turn off some of this noise and turn that off, and let's just turn this back on. Now you see we move, but we move in specific increments. It's always 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. And that is a good thing because that just gives us very discrete signals that we can key off of. Or we can translate that into frequencies if we are actually building an instrument. So that is fantastic. I love that. It is great. We are here and living for it. We're going to send this out over OSC. OSC, remember, stands for Open Sound Control, but if we don't have something to like view the signal, we don't know if it's actually working. So what we are going to do is there's this program called Protocol, and it just basically shows you MIDI, OSC, and a few other protocols. And so we are going to, we've got that already installed. First time running. And we'll bring this over here. So MIDI, OSC, Gamepad, and ArtNet. We're going to turn on OSC, and we notice we are in port 8000. We need that number. So we're going to enable it. We're going to say allow, and you notice that nothing is happening. It is just waiting there, waiting for signals. Let's go ahead and add OSC here, and it's OSC out because we are sending signals out. Now, it likes to default to 10,000. But if we do it to 8, and we come back over to protocol, you notice that these numbers are going. They are living their best life over in the OSC world. And there we have it. We built a camera that goes from light all the way to network protocols with OSC. If you like this sort of content, I would love to make more of it. I love building tools to help you build your creative coding environment and creative coding tool chest. And so leave a comment below and let me know if you love this type of video. All right, until next time, love you darlings. Bye-bye.